Imagine this for a second. You walk into your favorite supermarket, right?
Hmm.
And the shelves are just stripped bare. Not because of a storm or anything, but because a cyber attack completely paralyzed the food supply chain.
Yeah, or think about a big retailer, a name everyone knows, basically brought to its knees for weeks. Can't process online orders, can't even take contactless payments in the store, all because one of their vendors got compromised.
And the scary thing is, these aren't just like hypothetical scenarios anymore. This is the stuff that's actually happening. It's the reality of the cyber threat landscape right now here in 2025.
Yeah.
It's evolving so fast.
It really is. It's a profound shift in how we even think about vulnerability in this super interconnected digital world we live in. So, what we really want to do today is cut through all the noise, all the headlines.
Yeah, there's so much out there.
Exactly. We want to give you a clear, actionable understanding of these latest cyber threats. Explain why they really matter directly to you, whether you're in a big company, a small one, or just thinking about your own data. And crucially, talk about what concrete steps can actually be taken to, protect yourself.
We've really dug into it, haven't we? Looked at the latest industry reports,
Yeah.
real-world incidents, what the experts are saying about best practices. We want to bring you that critical intelligence.
We've gone deep into the latest available information to try and arm you with the knowledge you need to navigate this new reality.
Absolutely. And before we really dive into unpacking all this vital material, we definitely want to thank Stonefly for sponsoring this deep dive.
Yeah, big thanks to them.
Stonefly is a leader in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. So if you're looking for secure, ransomware-proof storage, you should know Stonefly sells air-gapped and immutable storage. You can contact them at sales@stonefly.com to schedule a demo.
All right, so let's get into it. The core of the matter. This shifting threat landscape that really defines 2025. And I think to truly grasp where we stand, we have to start with, one of the most authoritative analyses out there, the 2025 Data Breach Investigations Report, the DBIR.
Ah, yes, the DBIR. Anyone who follows cyber knows this one. It's like the gold standard, isn't it? An annual forensic look at actual data breaches. It breaks down how they happen, who's behind them, and importantly, what defenses actually work.
Exactly. And what makes it so valuable is its global reach. It pulls together aggregated, anonymized data from just a huge range of contributors, law enforcement, forensic firms, cyber insurers, you name it. This 2025 edition specifically covers incidents from November 1st, 2023, right through to October 31st, 2024. So it's really current stuff.
And it's not just a list of bad things happening, right? It actually gives you kind of roadmap.
That's the key point. It maps its findings to frameworks like the CIS critical security controls. So it offers organizations really concrete, actionable steps to fight the attacks they're most likely to face. The big question this year's report kind of implicitly asks is, well, if the blueprint is there, why aren't organizations building stronger defenses? It's a bit puzzling.
That is a powerful question. And when you look at the findings, wow, one statistic just jumps off the page. A truly staggering 88% of all breaches they analyzed were linked somehow to third-party involvement.
Yeah.
88%.
Yeah, it's almost unbelievable. That's nearly double the figure from the previous year.
Double. So what does that huge jump really mean for like an organization's security perimeter? Does the perimeter even mean anything anymore?
Well, 88% isn't just a number, right? It's basically redefining our security boundaries. What we're seeing is attackers pivoting. They're shifting from just banging on the front door of the main target to exploiting, let's say, the softer underbelly within the extended supply chain.
Okay, so going after the vendors, the partners.
Exactly. The report points to this surge being driven by a couple of things. One is attackers finding and exploiting vulnerabilities in those vendor systems. The other is simply the business interruption factor. If you hit a key supplier, the disruption cascades across the whole ecosystem, and that creates massive leverage for the attackers.
So my company's security isn't just about my defenses anymore.
Not at all. It's inherently tied to the security of every single vendor, every partner, every service provider you rely on. Your security is, quite literally, only as strong as the weakest link in that chain. And often that weakest link is way outside your direct control. It's a tough reality.
It really is sobering. And it connects directly to another major trend the DBIR highlights, the significant increase in attackers exploiting known vulnerabilities to get that first foot in the door, that initial access.
Yeah, they're actively scanning for those open doors.
And what's truly alarming here, I think, is the finding that only 55% of perimeter device vulnerabilities were fully remediated in the past year. only 55%.
Which means almost half, nearly 45% of known exploitable weaknesses just remained unresolved, left open.
That seems almost negligent, doesn't it? How can that be?
It really does border on that. It's a glaring statistic, and it's a stark call for action. It just underscores how absolutely critical diligent patch management and continuous system review are. Attackers automate the scanning for these unpatched weaknesses. They know it's often the path of least resistance.
So ignoring a known vulnerability isn't just missing a chance to lock the door.
It's like leaving it wide open with a welcome mat saying, "Come on in," for the criminals. It's basically inviting trouble.
Okay, so they get through that unlocked door, exploit a vulnerability. What's often waiting for them? What's the devastating outcome we keep seeing?
Ransomware. It's still the dominant threat in many ways. The DBIR paints a pretty alarming picture here. Ransomware was present in a shocking 75% of all the breaches they analyzed.
75%. That's 3/4 of all breaches.
Yeah, and that's a notable rise from last year. And if you look specifically at system intrusion breaches, where they actively break in ransomware showed up in 75% of those cases too, it's incredibly prevalent.
Why is it still so pervasive? Are we not getting better at stopping it?
Well, part of the problem is we're kind of witnessing a perfect storm scenario for ransomware right now. You've got the proliferation of ransomware as a service, or RAI.
Ah, yeah, the subscription models for crime.
Basically, yeah. Even less skilled criminals can essentially rent the tools and the infrastructure they need for an attack. They don't need deep technical know-how anymore. Combine that with the power of generative AI, which is lowering the entry barriers to cybercrime even further.
How is AI doing that? Making phishing emails better?
That's a big part of it, yeah. Crafting more convincing lures, automating parts of the attack. It's making ransomware not just more accessible, but frighteningly pervasive. It's evolved into a highly effective, scalable business model for these criminal groups.
And it's not just the big guys, the Fortune 500s, getting hit, is it? I remember the report highlighting small and medium businesses.
Absolutely, that's a crucial point. The DBIR reveals a disproportionate risk for SMBs. They're being targeted nearly 4 times more often than large organizations.
4 times more? Why? Are they just seen as easier pickings?
That's largely the speculation, yeah. SMBs often have less robust cybersecurity defenses, maybe fewer dedicated security staff, smaller budgets for the advanced tools, perhaps a perception of less expertise. So yeah, they appear as easier targets for quick gains, a higher return on investment for the attacker's effort.
So if you're running an SMB, you can't just think, oh, we're too small to be a target.
Definitely not. That's the critical insight here. Size absolutely does not equate to safety in today's threat landscape. You are very much on the radar, and you need to prepare accordingly. Just like a large enterprise would, everyone's in the crosshairs.
That's a vital message. The DBIR also breaks things down by industry, right? Highlighting specific vulnerabilities.
It does, yeah, which is really useful for tailoring defenses. For example, in the financial sector, it seems malicious actors are getting access to sensitive financial data with, and this is a, quote, little effort, which is concerning.
That effort. That's not good. What about healthcare?
Healthcare continues to be a major target. Vulnerabilities there risk highly sensitive patient information, staff data. The implications are immediate and severe. Privacy, huge regulatory fines, loss of trust. It's critical infrastructure.
And manufacturing. It's not just data thefts there, is it?
No, that's right. In manufacturing, we're seeing cybercriminals compromise security systems, not just to steal intellectual property or operational data, but actually disrupt physical operations, shutting down production lines, messing with supply chains. That can be devastating.
And the old standards, like payment card data.
Still a major focus. The need to keep payment card data secure is a constant foundational challenge across pretty much all industries that handle transactions. So yeah, while the attack methods evolve, some core targets remain because the data itself is just so valuable.
Okay, so that gives us a good picture of the broad landscape, the third parties, the vulnerabilities, the ransomware, who's being targeted. But even with all this tech involved, often the way in is still us.
People.
The human element. It remains arguably the weakest link, and attackers know it.
Let's dive into that. Social engineering phishing, pretexting the DBIR, identifies these as top causes of really costly data breaches.
It's remarkable, isn't it, how these abstract threats translate into really damaging real-world events. Take the Aflac cybersecurity incident back on June 12, 2025.
Yeah.
That's a great example.
What happened there? Was it a direct hack?
No, that's the key. It wasn't a brute force attack on their core systems.
Yeah.
Instead, a sophisticated cybercrime group used clever social engineering tactics to gain network access. They manipulated someone.
And the fallout.
It was substantial. They got access to claims info, health data, even social security numbers for customers, beneficiaries, employees, agents, a whole range of stakeholders. It was a stark reminder of how just one human vulnerability can crack open the door to a major data breach. And you mentioned it was part of a wider campaign.
Yeah, Aflac wasn't alone. Their experience was apparently part of a broader, coordinated cybercrime campaign specifically targeting the insurance industry. It just shows how specialized and organized these attacks can become. They pick a sector and go after it systematically.
But the game is changing even with phishing, isn't it? With AI getting involved. You mentioned generative AI earlier.
Oh, absolutely. The sophistication is accelerating dramatically thanks to Gen AI and the rise of what are called polymorphic attacks. We've seen a huge jump, 17.3% increase in phishing emails in just the last 6 months recorded, so September 2024 to February 2025.
17% in 6 months is a big leap.
It is, and it's not just more phishing, it's smarter phishing. AI-powered polymorphic attacks at an unprecedented scale. Get this, 82.6% of phishing emails in that period used AI in some way. And even more concerning, 92% of the polymorphic attacks leveraged AI.
Okay, unpack polymorphic for us. What does that actually mean in this context?
Right. So think of traditional phishing detection. It often relies on recognizing known bad signatures, specific phrases, links, attachment types. Polymorphic attacks use AI to constantly make tiny, almost imperceptible changes to the email each time it's sent.
Like what kind of changes?
Tweaking attachment names slightly, changing the sender display name, altering the email signature, adding random characters or even invisible symbols to the subject line, changing image metadata using slightly different domains. The AI generates endless variations.
It's like a digital chameleon constantly shifting its appearance just enough.
Exactly. Just enough to evade those traditional known bad block lists, the signature-based detection. It can even fool some of the more advanced natural language processing systems that try to understand the intent of the email. The constant shifting makes it incredibly hard to pin down.
That sounds incredibly difficult to defend against.
It is, and add another layer of complexity. 57.9% of these phishing emails were sent from compromised accounts that were previously legitimate.
So they look like they're coming from someone you know or a company you trust.
Precisely. And 11.4% originated from within the supply chain. Imagine getting a malicious email that looks like it's from a trusted vendor. That drastically increases the chances of someone clicking because the source appears legitimate.
Wow. Okay. So the old ways of spotting phishing are becoming obsolete.
Pretty much. There's a prediction floating around that traditional methods of grouping phishing emails based on common characteristics will be entirely useless by 2027 because of this AI-powered polymorphic behavior. It demands totally new technical countermeasures, things that don't rely on static signatures or known patterns.
That's a huge shift for defense strategies. So with all this new sophistication in phishing, how are the actual ransomware payloads being delivered? Are they just attaching malware still?
Phishing remains a primary delivery mechanism. We saw a 22.6% increase in ransomware payloads delivered via phishing emails overall, but that accelerated massively, a 57.5% increase in just the recent months analyzed, November 2024 to February 2025.
So they're getting better at getting the lure clicked and better at delivering the payload.
Yes, and the obfuscation techniques they use to get the payload past defenses are really quite cunning. HTML smuggling is apparently the most popular method right now. It showed an 85.6% increase.
HTML smuggling.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Okay, so instead of attaching the malicious file directly, which email scanners might pick up, they send a seemingly harmless HTML file. When you open that HTML file in your browser, the code inside instructs your browser to assemble and download the malicious payload on the fly.
Whoa. So it uses the victim's own browser to bypass the email gateway scanning?
Exactly. It effectively masks the payload from initial file scanning. And another tactic they're using is deliberately increasing the file sizes of malware attachments and these malicious HTML files.
Why bigger files? Seems counterintuitive.
It's a tactic to exploit email latency service level agreements, or SLAs. By making the file larger, it takes longer for security systems to scan it thoroughly. They're hoping the email gets delivered to your inbox before the security system finishes its analysis and flags it. It's a timing game, leveraging system limitations.
That's clever in a really devious way. And you mentioned multi-layered obfuscation, like in that INC ransom example.
Right, that was a perfect illustration. The payload was hidden behind multiple layers. First, a password-protected .zip file requires a user to actively extract it. Then, inside that, HTML smuggling. Then, they used AI-generated random text within the code to constantly change its digital fingerprint, its hash value, to avoid signature detection. And finally, they obfuscated the malicious URLs needed to download further components.
How do they obfuscate URLs?
Various tricks. They might write the URL backward in the script to reverse. They might use base64 encoding, which turns text into a seemingly random jumble of characters. Sometimes they even scatter fragments of the URL throughout the script, so no single part triggers a block list. It makes it incredibly hard for automated systems to recognize the malicious destination.
Okay, so they get the file onto the machine. What happens then? Is it game over?
They make it very difficult for the user to stop it at that point. Once downloaded and executed, this type of malware is often engineered to be, well, virtually unstoppable by the average user. It uses prompts disguised as legitimate system alerts. You need to enable content to view this document. It actively blocks things you might try, like right-clicking to inspect or opening developer tools in the browser. And it often employs debugger detection, so security analysts can't easily step through the code to see what it's doing.
It's designed to prevent any kind of intervention.
Pretty much. It's a full-spectrum attack, designed from the lure to the execution to make detection, analysis, and recovery incredibly difficult.
That level of planning is, frankly, terrifying. But the human element isn't just about clicking bad links, is it? You mentioned something earlier that really caught my attention. Cybercriminals infiltrating organizations through the hiring process.
Yes, this is a novel and deeply insidious attack vector that's proving shockingly effective. It's not just phishing anymore, it's planting insiders. There was that compelling anecdote about a fake employee they referred to as Kyle.
Tell us about Kyle.
So Kyle applied for a job using a completely fake CV, an AI-manipulated headshot looked totally convincing, and even a stolen social security number. Got hired. The moment he switched on his brand new company laptop, boom, immediately tried to install malware.
Wow. Did he succeed?
Thankfully, in that specific case, the company had good controls. His account was isolated, and he never gained broader network access. But the really chilling part is this was identified as part of a larger North Korean state-sponsored scheme.
North Korea. What's their goal?
Two main goals, it seems. One is purely financial place. These fake employees in remote tech jobs have them funnel their salaries back to the regime. The other, perhaps more disturbing, is espionage, or setting up for future attacks, planting a mole with legitimate access deep inside the organization.
So this fundamentally changes how you have to think about vetting people, especially for remote roles.
Absolutely. It's not just about checking their tech skills. It's about verifying their actual identity and looking for anomalies.
What kinds of roles are they targeting most?
The data we looked at showed a clear pattern. 64% of these job application-related phishing or infiltration attempts targeted engineering roles.
Why engineering specifically?
Couple reasons. High job mobility in tech roles makes frequent changes less suspicious. And critically, engineers often have privileged access to core systems, source code, sensitive data. They're valuable targets.
They're using things like coding challenges.
Yeah, that's another cunning tactic. They disguise malware as a coding challenge file. The hope is the applicant, maybe an engineer already employed elsewhere, will download and run it on their current company's machine, maybe to test it out. Instant infiltration or ransomware deployment on the current employer.
That's devious, spreading the attack even through the application process.
And to maximize their chances, 52% of these job application attacks target shared mailboxes, like your general HR or recruitment inbox, not just individual hiring managers. This increases the victim pool, maybe catching someone less technically savvy who handles initial application sorting.
And it's not just fake text on a resume anymore, right? AI deepfakes are playing a role.
A huge role. Cybercriminals are using AI to generate incredibly realistic fake profile pictures. They build out elaborate fake LinkedIn accounts, populate fake GitHub profiles showing coding activity, even forge professional certificates. It's becoming very hard to tell real from fake online personas.
Remember that Erupt case where deepfake video impersonation in an online meeting cost the company GBP 20 million?
Exactly. That's the level we're talking about now. It's not just text in an email or a slightly dodgy resume. It's sophisticated multimodal deception using AI, voice cloning, video deepfakes. It's here.
So the implication is much broader than just IT roles then.
Definitely. While engineering is a prime target, finance and HR roles are also incredibly vulnerable. They handle sensitive personal and financial data. They're deeply involved in the hiring and payment processes. The methods are getting so sophisticated that traditional background checks and interviews might not be enough. It puts a much greater onus on continuous vigilance, multi-factor verification, and maybe even looking for behavioral anomalies.
This theme of interconnectedness keeps coming up. A weakness anywhere can ripple outwards, which brings us squarely to supply chain cybersecurity. That phrase seems almost synonymous with ransomware now, doesn't it? So many big leaks seem to start with a supplier.
It's alarmingly common. In fact, one survey found that a striking 62% of organizations had experienced a ransomware attack that originated directly from one of their supply chain partners.
62%. That's not just a theoretical risk anymore. It's happening constantly.
It really is. It's a very real, very frequent occurrence with immediate, tangible, and often devastating consequences.
Okay, so the material we reviewed breaks these supply chain attacks down into three main types, which is helpful for understanding them. The first type is called the fake supply chain. What's that about? Sounds like more social engineering.
It is. Basically, social engineering scaled up strategically. Hackers impersonate legitimate players in your supply chain. Could be suppliers, could be your own CEO asking for an urgent payment, could even be government officials. The goal is always to manipulate a victim into taking a compromising action.
Like giving up credentials or wiring money.
Exactly. Disclosing sensitive info, transferring funds. They tend to use two main approaches here. There's the broad shotgun approach, generic phishing blasts. Think fake FedEx or DHL delivery notices, or maybe impersonating PPE suppliers during a health crisis, trying to catch anyone.
And the other approach
Is the much more targeted sniper approach. This involves highly tailored messages, often using publicly available information about contracts or relationships. We saw this with the city of Ocala. Florida fraudsters impersonated a known, legitimate contractor to trick the city into sending them $742,000.
Wow.
Or sometimes they compromise an email service provider that a company uses, allowing them to send malicious emails that look like they're coming from a legitimate business partner.
So even with all the fancy tech attacks, simple human manipulation is still incredibly effective.
It absolutely is. The defense against this type really demands multi-step validation for any sensitive action, especially financial transfers. And adopting a rigorous zero-trust policy, even with suppliers you think you know and trust. Always verify, verify, verify.
Okay, always verify. What's the second type of supply chain attack? Targeting supplier-managed resources.
Right. So this is where attackers go after resources that are managed by your third-party suppliers, but which contain your sensitive data or provide critical services to you. Think about data breaches happening at the vendor level.
Like the Marriott example.
Exactly. Marriott's breach exposed huge amounts of customer data, including SSNs, but the breach originated with one of their vendors who handled reservation systems or something similar. Suppliers often hold vast amounts of client data. We also see cloud misconfigurations constantly.
The cloud again.
Yeah. A simple oversight in how a user company or even the supplier managing a service for them sets up their cloud security can leave vast amounts of sensitive data just exposed on the public internet. It's that classic problem of unclear responsibility. Is it my cloud security or theirs?
And operational disruptions, too.
Definitely. If a key supplier's DNS server gets attacked, for example, it can cripple your online operations. We saw with the CrowdStrike outage how reliant companies are on these third-party services and how emergency supply chain planning for critical IT services is often, well, poorly designed.
So how do you defend against this type?
It really involves building cybersecurity assessments right into your supplier selection and onboarding process. Don't just look at price and capability. Rigorously evaluate their security posture and their responsiveness to potential threats. Treat cybersecurity as a critical factor, just like you would financial stability or sustainability practices. It has to be part of the due diligence.
Makes sense. Treat it like any other major business risk.
Yeah.
Now, the third type sounds even more intricate. Attacks that come through a supplier's access into your systems.
This one is particularly insidious. Hackers first infiltrate a supplier's system, maybe one that has legitimate access to your network or data. Then they use that compromised supplier access as a secret tunnel, a conduit, to breach your company's security from within your supposedly trusted infrastructure.
So they're using the supplier as a Trojan horse.
Precisely. This can be software-based. Think about the MagCard attacks. Hackers inject malicious code into third-party e-commerce scripts or payment modules used by online retailers. That code then steals credit card info directly from your customers as they type it into your website.
Right, skimming card data via a trusted third-party script.
Or the really famous example, the SolarWinds breach. Hackers compromised SolarWinds' software update mechanism. So when customers downloaded and installed a legitimate-looking update, they were actually installing a backdoor that gave the hackers access to their networks. Government agencies, major corporations, all hit through a trusted software supplier.
And it can be hardware-based, too.
Yes. The classic example here is the 2013 Target data breach. Attackers got into Target's network and eventually reached their point-of-sale systems to steal credit card data. How did they first get in? Through stolen VPN credentials belonging to Target's HVAC supplier, a company called Fazio Mechanical.
The heating and air conditioning company. That was the entry point for that massive breach.
That was the initial foothold. It's a prime example of how seemingly unrelated vendors can provide an unexpected pathway in. The critical lesson here is you can't just treat third-party software or hardware or even service connections as black boxes that you just plug in and trust.
You need visibility.
You need visibility, continuous monitoring, regular updates, ongoing vulnerability assessments for everything that connects to your environment. It has to mirror that continuous improvement philosophy you see in quality management. Security isn't a one-time check, it's an ongoing process.
And these aren't just abstract types of attacks, are they? They have incredibly real, sometimes devastating impacts. Let's talk about that United Natural Foods, UNFI, and Whole Foods incident. That happened just recently, June 5th, 2025.
Yeah, that was a huge one. A direct, palpable hit to the U.S. food supply chain. A cyber attack, widely suspected to be ransomware, although UNFI hasn't officially confirmed, forced them to shut down their core systems. UNFI is the main distributor for Whole Foods, and they supply over 30,000 other grocery stores across North America.
So systems down meant no deliveries.
Pretty much halted deliveries. For weeks afterward, they were still operating on a limited, often manual basis, scrambling to get things back online. The impact was immediate and visible to everyone. Empty shelves, product shortages reported at Whole Foods and many other grocers. It even affected the U.S. military's Defense Commissary Agency, which relies on UNFI.
That's incredible food supply. It really drives home the potential impact.
It does. And it directly led to that warning we heard: food security is national security. It even prompted the proposal of the Bipartisan Farm and Food Cybersecurity Act of 2025. It shows how deeply these cyber incidents can ripple out to affect basic necessities and even national well-being.
Absolutely critical infrastructure. Then there was the Marks and Spencer attack in the UK back in April 2025, another supply chain issue.
Yes, another significant one, again, caused by a third-party vendor compromise. This one was attributed to a sophisticated group known as Scattered Spider, and they reportedly used social engineering tactics to get their initial access into the vendor.
And what was the impact on M&S? It sounded pretty bad.
It was severe, yeah. It hit them across multiple fronts. Their online clothing orders and gift card services were completely stopped for weeks. Even their in-store operations were disrupted. Problems with contactless payments, issues with stock fulfillment reaching the stores.
So operational chaos. Was customer data taken too?
Yes. Reports indicated customer data, including names, email addresses, and dates of birth, was accessed, and the financial cost. It was staggering. Estimates put the lost revenue around $300 million, and their market value reportedly dropped by $750 million almost immediately after the incident became public.
Wow. $300 million revenue lost, $750 million market value hit from a vendor compromise.
It just vividly highlights the immense financial and reputational damage these supply chain attacks inflict. It's way beyond just an IT problem. And the list just keeps going, doesn't it? JBS Foods paying that $11 million ransom, Dole Food Company reporting over $10 million in losses, a Holdell Hayes hit with ransomware, Sam's Club targeted by Clop ransomware via a vulnerability, Victoria's Secret had their shopping site shut down, North Face hit by credential stuffing, Adidas had data exposed via a third-party customer service provider. It's relentless.
It really is a sobering list. So given all of this, the trends from the DBIR or the social engineering tactics, these devastating supply chain incidents, what are the absolute critical lessons organizations have to take away from this? Feels like the first one has to be that cybersecurity isn't just an IT issue anymore.
That's the absolute core truth, isn't it? It has to be understood as mission critical, a fundamental strategic business priority woven into the fabric of every single operation, from the boardroom down.
And technically layered defenses are still key.
Right. Absolutely essential. Robust firewalls, sophisticated intrusion detection systems, diligent software patching, we keep coming back to that. But also things like immutable and offline backups are crucial for recovery. And highly segmented networks to try and contain any breach that does inevitably occur. Limit the blast radius.
But you said earlier, people are often the easiest entry point.
Still true. which means a constant, unwavering commitment to multi-factor authentication, MFA, for everyone, and rigorously limiting administrative privileges, the principle of least privilege again. Only give people the access they absolutely need to do their job. And of course, routine, engaging security awareness training, helping employees spot phishing, understand the latest threats, know what to do if they suspect something. Because most breaches, even the really complex ones, still start with just a single click on a malicious link or attachment.
That single click. It's amazing how much damage it can cause.
Hmm.
And what about compliance frameworks like NIST or CMMC? Are they just paperwork exercises?
They shouldn't be. That's a huge mistake companies make. Compliance frameworks should be seen as powerful security tools. They provide essential blueprints to validate and continuously improve your actual real-world security controls. Use them to make sure your defenses aren't just theoretical, but actually robust and working in practice.
Okay, use compliance to drive real security.
Right.
What else? Contingency planning.
Absolutely critical, especially thinking about the supply chain. Develop diversified suppliers for critical goods or services if possible. Establish manual ordering or operational systems as a backup. Don't have single points of failure. The UNFI incident was a stark lesson there.
Avoid putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And finally, collaboration. Sharing information about threats and incidents across industries and actively communicating with government agencies. It's vital for accelerating detection, improving response, and recovering more effectively. We're all facing a shared threat environment. We need a united front.
Makes sense. Building a collective defense. And you mentioned reputation management earlier.
Yeah, that's crucial too. How you communicate during and after an incident matters hugely. Proactive communication, having customer support contingencies ready. Sustained outages combined with silence or confusing messages can damage brand trust and your competitive advantage far more deeply than many organizations realize. Transparency, even when it's difficult, is usually the better path.
Okay, so understanding the threats, learning the lessons, that's one part. But how do we actively fortify defenses against this new reality? Let's shift gears and talk about best practices, maybe starting with the cloud, since so much relies on it now. Cloud security fundamentals.
Right. So cloud security, in essence, is all about protecting the data, the applications, the services, and the underlying infrastructure that live in cloud computing environments. The main technical components you're usually dealing with are compute, your virtual machines, storage, where your data lives, networking, how it all connects, and arguably the most critical piece, identity and access management, or IAM.
IAM seems to come up again and again. Why is it so central?
Because it's the gatekeeper. IAM rigorously controls who gets access to what cloud resources. It's about ensuring only authorized users and processes can touch sensitive data or critical applications. Get IAM wrong, and it doesn't matter how good your other defenses are. It safeguards against both external threats trying to get in and internal misuse, whether accidental or malicious.
But the cloud isn't inherently secure just because it's the cloud, right?
Yeah.
There are unique challenges.
Oh, absolutely not. The cloud introduces its own set of complexities. The biggest hurdles include, well, the constantly evolving threats we've been talking about, but also the persistent issue of human error leading to misconfigurations. That's a huge one. Also, misunderstandings about the shared responsibility model, who's responsible for what between the provider and the customer. Navigating complex compliance requirements across different clouds. And again, securing those crucial third-party integrations that plug into your cloud environment. All of these demand really proactive and adaptive strategies.
Okay, so let's get practical. What are the essential best practices for building and maintaining a truly secure cloud environment in 2025? The material we looked at had a whole list, like 22 key steps. We probably can't cover all of them in detail, but let's hit some of the most impactful ones. First up, truly understanding that shared responsibility model.
This is absolutely foundational. You have to internalize this. Cloud security is a partnership. The cloud provider, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, whoever they are responsible for the security of the cloud. That means the physical data centers, the core network infrastructure, the virtualization layer. But you, the customer, are unequivocally responsible for security in the cloud.
Meaning my data, my applications.
Your data, your applications, how you configure the services, who you grant access to via IAM, your operating system patching if you're managing VMs. Clearly defining these roles and responsibilities within your own organization is paramount. If you assume the provider is handling something that's actually your job, you create dangerous security gaps.
That clarity is crucial. Okay, next big one, multi-factor authentication, MFA. Seems basic, but still vital.
Absolutely vital, but the conversation needs to evolve beyond just enable MFA. For a truly well-informed organization in 2025, the pivot needs to be towards phishing-resistant MFA, especially for critical accounts.
Phishing resistant, what does that mean? Like beyond SMS codes?
Exactly. Traditional MFA, like SMS codes or even simple push notifications on an app, can still be bypassed through sophisticated social engineering, tricking someone into approving a login or handing over a code. Phishing-resistant MFA uses stronger methods, primarily things based on the FIDO2 or WebAuthn standards. Think physical security keys like YubiKeys or platform authenticators built into devices.
How do they resist phishing?
They use cryptography to bind the authentication request to the specific device and the specific website or service the user is trying to access. So even if an attacker tricks you into trying to log into their fake site, the security key simply won't work because the origin doesn't match. It makes credential harvesting or MFA prompt bombing virtually impossible for those protected accounts. It's a huge step up, especially for admin roles.
Okay, so strong, phishing-resistant MFA. Then there's the principle of least privilege, POLP. We mentioned it briefly. How does that apply specifically in the cloud?
It's absolutely critical in the cloud because cloud environments offer such granular control. POLP dictates that every user account, every application service identity, every automated process should only be granted the absolute minimal set permissions required to perform its specific defined function. Nothing more.
So no handing out admin rights just because it's easier.
Definitely not. By rigorously adhering to least privilege, you dramatically minimize the potential damage if an account does get compromised or if you have a malicious insider. They simply won't have the permissions needed to access sensitive data they shouldn't see or make damaging changes to critical systems. It makes unauthorized lateral movement much, much harder for an attacker.
Makes sense. Limit the blast radius again.
Yeah.
Now, cloud environments change constantly, right? So regular audits must be key.
Essential. As cloud environments grow, teams deploy new services, configurations change, things can drift significantly from your established security best practices or compliance baselines. Regular and ideally automated audits help you quickly spot these discrepancies, maybe a storage bucket accidentally made public, or overly permissive network rules. Finding and fixing these quickly ensures continuous compliance and drastically reduces the risk of breaches that stem from these simple, avoidable misconfigurations.
Speaking of data, keeping it encrypted seems like table stakes now.
It absolutely should be. Encryption, both for data at rest, sitting in storage, and data in transit, moving across networks, means that even if someone managing to access the raw data during a breach, it remains scrambled and indecipherable without the correct encryption key. Using strong, modern standards like TLS 1.3 for data in transit and robust encryption for storage services is vital. And managing those encryption keys securely, including regular rotation, is part of that process.
And backups. Still crucial even in the cloud.
More crucial than ever, arguably. Ransomware can encrypt your cloud data too. Accidental deletion happens. System failures occur. Backups are your ultimate safety net. They ensure you can restore critical data and systems with minimal disruption. And the best practice is storing those backups securely, ideally geographically separate from your primary environment, and using technologies like air gapping or immutability to protect the backups themselves from being deleted or encrypted by attackers.
Right, protect the backups too. What about APIs? They seem to be everywhere.
They are the connective tissue of modern applications, especially in the cloud. But they're also often exposed gateways to your data and services, making them prime targets. Securing your APIs means implementing strong authentication and authorization, making sure only legitimate applications and users can call them. Regularly reviewing API security configurations, implementing rate limiting to prevent abuse, and continuously monitoring API access logs for suspicious activity are all essential steps to prevent them from becoming an attack vector.
And patch management. We keep circling back to this, don't we?
Yeah.
Just as important in the cloud.
Absolutely. Whether you're managing virtual machines, containers, or using platform services, vulnerabilities get discovered all the time. Regularly applying updates and patches tackles these known weak points in operating systems, application libraries, and even the cloud services themselves. It directly reduces your attack surface and closes off those potential entry points we talked about from the DBIR findings. It's fundamental cyber hygiene.
Okay, fundamental hygiene. What about hardening the network side in the cloud?
You need a robust network security posture. This involves implementing powerful cloud-native firewalls or security groups, leveraging things like virtual private clouds, VPCs, or virtual networks, VNets, to create logically isolated segments for different applications or environments. And crucially, Regularly reviewing and pruning your network access rules. Make sure only necessary ports and protocols are open and only from trusted sources. Keep the gates as tightly controlled as possible.
Understanding compliance requirements. You mentioned this isn't just paperwork.
Right. Frameworks like GDPR for privacy, IPA for healthcare data, PCI DSS for payment cards, they aren't just bureaucratic hoops. They provide incredibly valuable guidance on how to safeguard specific types of sensitive data and meet your legal and ethical obligations. You need to identify which regulations apply to you and then meticulously map those requirements to specific security controls in your cloud environment, things like encryption, access logging, audit trails, data residency controls. It ensures you're building security with purpose.
And what about checking up on your cloud provider themselves?
You have to. Your cloud provider is a critical part of your supply chain, essentially. Their security posture directly impacts yours. So you need to do your due diligence. Assess their security certifications. Do they have SOC 2 Type 2 reports, ISO 27001 certification, FedRAMP authorization if you're dealing with government data? Meticulously review their audit reports, talk to them about their security practices, ensure their approach aligns with your organization's specific security and compliance needs. It's not a set-it-and-forget-it relationship.
Due diligence on your biggest supplier, essentially. Now, containers and workloads are a big part of modern cloud apps. How do you secure those?
That's a key area. Containers and dynamic workloads introduce unique risks because they're often short-lived and deployed frequently via automated pipelines. Securing them involves several layers. Use vulnerability scanning on your container images before deployment to catch known issues. Start with hardened, minimal base images to reduce the attack surface. Implement runtime protection tools that can detect and block suspicious behavior inside the running container in real time. And critically, integrate container security scanning and policy enforcement directly into your CI/CD pipeline, your build and deployment process. Shift security left, catch problems earlier.
Shift left. Got it. And continuous monitoring of...
It is complex, especially in large or multi-cloud environments, but it's absolutely essential. Cloud environments change incredibly rapidly. You need real-time, continuous monitoring to detect anomalies that could indicate a breach or misconfiguration, things like unusual login patterns, attempts to access sensitive data, unexpected network traffic, sudden changes to security group rules. Without continuous monitoring, these critical indicators can easily get lost in the noise until it's far too late. Centralized logging and security information and event management, SIEM tools, are key here.
And penetration testing, still valuable in the cloud.
Immensely valuable. Pen testing is about getting an objective adversarial perspective on your defenses. You simulate real-world attacks against your cloud environment applications, infrastructure, configurations to proactively expose weak points before the actual bad guys do. Regular professional penetration testing provides incredibly valuable, actionable insights to help you continuously improve your security posture and avoid complacency. It tells you where you're really vulnerable.
Find the holes before someone else does.
Yeah.
Okay, reviewing cloud configurations regularly.
Back to misconfigurations again. They are consistently one of the top causes of cloud breaches. It's easy for settings to drift or for new services to be deployed insecurely. Automating configuration checks against security benchmarks, like those from CIS, and having robust change management processes for updating configurations are vital. Catch and rectify these vulnerabilities proactively. Don't wait to react after a breach.
What about agentless vulnerability management? That sounds useful.
It simplifies things significantly, especially in dynamic cloud environments. Traditional vulnerability scanning often requires installing a software agent on every virtual machine or instance, which can be cumbersome to manage and impact performance. Agentless solutions connect directly to the cloud provider's APIs to assess your resources, VMs, storage, databases, serverless functions without needing agents. This allows for seamless, continuous scanning across your entire cloud estate with much less operational overhead for your security teams.
Less friction, better coverage. Makes sense. Strengthening data governance policies.
This goes hand in hand with compliance and security. Strong data governance ensures that all your sensitive data is properly classified, managed, accessed, and protected throughout its entire lifecycle in the cloud. This involves defining clear policies for data classification, what's sensitive, what's public, implementing rigorous role-based access control, RBAC, based on that classification, enforcing encryption appropriately, and having clear data retention and dilution policies. It prevents data misuse, reduces the risk of exposure, and helps meet privacy regulations.
And limiting public exposure of cloud resources seems like a basic but critical point.
You'd be surprised how often this goes wrong. Accidentally exposing things like storage buckets, databases, or even management interfaces to the public internet dramatically increases your attack surface. You need to rigorously restrict access to only authorized users or services, utilize private networking features like private endpoints whenever possible, and configure strict firewall rules to minimize any unnecessary public exposure. Default to private, open up only what's absolutely necessary and carefully controlled.
Automating compliance monitoring.
Trying to manually track compliance across potentially thousands of cloud resources and constantly changing regulations is a recipe for failure. Automation is key. Using specialized cloud security posture management, CSPM tools, or compliance automation platforms allows you to continuously monitor your environment against specific regulatory standards, GDPR, HCPA, PCI, DSS, etc., and your own internal policies. These tools can identify violations in real time, generate reports for audits, and help ensure you stay compliant without drowning in manual checks.
And practicing your response plan. Incident response drills.
An incident response plan sitting on a shelf is useless. You need to practice it. Conducting regular drills simulating different types of breaches or security events prepares your team to react swiftly and effectively when a real incident occurs. These drills highlight gaps in your plan, identify areas where communication or technical processes need improvement, and ensure everyone knows their specific role and responsibilities when under pressure. Muscle memory for crisis response.
Build that muscle memory. Okay, implementing zero trust architecture. That term is everywhere.
It is, and for good reason. Zero trust fundamentally shifts the security paradigm. Instead of assuming anything inside your network perimeter is trusted, it operates on the principle of never trust, always verify. Every user, every device, every application, every network flow must be authenticated and authorized before being granted access, regardless of where they are located. In the cloud, this means strong identity verification, like phishing-resistant MFA, enforcing least privilege access, using microsegmentation to limit lateral movement, and continuously monitoring activity for suspicious behavior. It significantly reduces the risk from compromised credentials or insider threats.
Never trust, always verify.
Got it.
And finally, consolidating cloud security solutions. Why is that important?
Because managing dozens of disparate point security tools for different aspects of cloud security, vulnerability scanning, compliance, threat detection, IAM inevitably leads to complexity, operational inefficiencies, visibility gaps, and potentially overlooked risks. The trend now is towards consolidating these capabilities into integrated, centralized cloud-native application protection platforms, CCNAPPs, or similar suites. This simplifies operations for security teams, enhances visibility across the entire cloud footprint, from development to runtime, and improves the ability to correlate alerts and respond to threats more effectively in complex multi-cloud environments. Fewer panes of glass, better context.
Phew. Okay, that's an incredibly thorough roadmap of best practices for locking down the cloud. But beyond the pure tech controls, we also need to adapt to those newer threats, like the AI-powered social engineering.
Absolutely. Technology alone isn't enough. Employee awareness is now more critical than ever before. Organizations need to step up their training, specifically educating employees, especially those in public-facing roles like executives, sales, customer service, on how to detect these increasingly sophisticated AI-generated voice calls or deepfake video impersonations. It's a new kind of threat they need to recognize.
And just awareness isn't enough, right? We need new verification steps.
Precisely. We need to build in extra friction, extra verification before executing sensitive actions based only on a virtual interaction. Maybe implementing pre-agreed challenge questions or secret codes to be exchanged during important virtual meetings, particularly for high-risk individuals or high-value transactions. It's about adding that human-driven sanity check to counter the convincing fakes.
Sanity checks. Good idea. And what about those malicious QR codes you mentioned? They seem like a sneaky way around email filters.
They are. It's an increasing trend because, as you said, most traditional email security solutions simply don't scan the content of QR codes. They see an image, maybe flag it, maybe not, but they don't analyze the URL hidden within it.
And the risk is someone scans it with their personal phone.
Exactly. They scan it with their phone or tablet, which likely bypasses all your corporate network security controls and policies. Suddenly, they're potentially directed to a phishing site or malware download on a device outside your managed environment. It's a significant blind spot.
So what's the recommendation there?
Two main things. First, explicitly include the threat of malicious QR codes in your regular phishing simulation exercises and awareness training. Make people aware of the risk. Second, start evaluating and deploying security solutions that can specifically detect and analyze QR codes within emails or other documents, plugging that visibility gap.
Okay, add QR codes to the training and look for tech that spots them. Finally, let's touch again on protecting against those state-sponsored insider threats, the fake job applicants. That feels like a really tough one.
It is subtle and incredibly dangerous. The risk profile, as we discussed, involves state actors, particularly cited from North Korea, actively applying for legitimate remote tech jobs. Software engineers, developers, AI specialists, cloud engineers, even cybersecurity roles themselves.
And the goal is either stealing salary or getting inside access for later attacks.
Yes, either siphoning off salaries to fund the regime, or, more strategically, embedding a privileged insider who can later conduct espionage, steal intellectual property, deploy ransomware from within, or sabotage systems. They are literally trying to get hired as your next attacker.
So the due diligence for remote hires, especially in tech, needs to be significantly ramped up.
Absolutely. Unprecedented levels of scrutiny are required. This means actively monitoring for suspicious IP address inconsistencies. Does the login location match where the employee claims to be? Watching for unusual login times or patterns, looking for unauthorized attempts to access systems or data they shouldn't need, and paying close attention to concerning HR-related behaviors during the hiring process and early employment.
Like what kind of HR behaviors?
Things like repeatedly rescheduling interviews, being persistently unclear in communication, consistently refusing to use a webcam during virtual meetings, making identity verification harder, failing background checks, obviously, or showing glaring discrepancies between the skills claimed on their resume and their actual performance during technical assessments or initial tasks. It's about piecing together those subtle anomalies that might signal something isn't right, that this isn't just a normal candidate. It requires vigilance from HR, hiring managers, and IT security working together.
It really takes a village, doesn't it? This has been an incredibly comprehensive deep dive into the cyber threat landscape of 2025. It's undeniably clear, I think, that the sophistication and the sheer volume of these threats are just escalating at an alarming rate, driven by that relentless rise of ransomware and the really pervasive transformative influence of AI and things like phishing.
And that critical vulnerability of the supply chain has never been more apparent, has it? It transforms external partners, vendors, even software updates into potential entry points for these really devastating, cascading attacks that can impact entire industries, even critical infrastructure like the food supply. It just fundamentally underscores the indispensable role of having robust, multi-layered security practices, constantly adapting those practices, and crucially, having a highly aware and well-trained human element at every single level of the organization. You can't just rely on tech.
Absolutely. And understanding these threats, really digging into them like we've tried to do today, isn't just some academic exercise for cybersecurity professionals. It directly empowers you, the listener, to make better, more informed decisions, whether you're navigating the complexities inside a large enterprise, leading a small business trying to stay safe, or even just managing your own personal digital life and data.
Yeah, the digital world we all operate in is just more complex and frankly more challenging than ever before. Understanding these evolving threats isn't just about basic protection anymore. It's fundamentally about building resilience, both organizationally and personally, and fostering a culture where we're continuously adapting to what the attackers are doing.
So maybe the provocative thought to leave everyone with is this. In this increasingly digital and hyper-connected world, the question really isn't if an attack will occur against you or your organization anymore, but when it will occur. And the real question is, will you be prepared for it?
That's the core question. Cybersecurity isn't just a technical challenge. It's become a fundamental aspect of organizational resilience, national security, and even personal trust. What steps will you prioritize to stay ahead in this incredibly dynamic landscape?
As we wrap up our deep dive today, it's clear the challenges are significant, but so are the opportunities to strengthen our defenses. Remember, to help secure your critical digital assets against these sophisticated threats, our sponsor Stonefly offers air-gapped and immutable storage solutions. These provide secure, ransomware-proof storage options ideal for enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. But for a demo, you can reach out to them directly at sales@stonefly.com.
So think about it. What concrete steps will you take starting today to strengthen your digital defenses?